That recording will be sent out probably tomorrow morning. So if you want to go back and reference anything that's covered this evening, feel free to do so. Also attached to that recording is a quick survey. Should take you no more than 2 minutes. We value your opinion as students and alumni, so we're certainly looking for your feedback. The session does have the chat feature as you have seen, so we will certainly welcome questions going into the chat, and then once we do get to the designated Q&A, we will cover those. If you want to raise your hand and ask any questions, feel free to do so as well, or like I said, just post those right into the chat. This is one session that we've had as part of our larger career quest that started in early January and will go into next week. Our next career quest will be during the spring, sometime in May. So keep an eye out for that, but we certainly are running events year round. So if this is your first event that you've joined with us, or maybe it's your 10th, who knows? But we certainly thank you for jumping in today. From here, what I am going to do is I am certainly going to stop talking and pass it over to our presenter, who is an alumni. So Cyprian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, RJ. Cyprian here, joining from New Jersey. And happy to have this conversation. I have only 50 or 60 slides that I'm going to go to, so I'm going to be very fast. I'm just kidding. I have a couple of slides, but really I want to make this session as interactive as possible. If we can hold up for the end for the Q&A, we can definitely do that. If you have something specific while I'm saying something, feel free to raise your hand or post the question in chat, and RJ will help me with managing all the flow of questions. So with that said, I'm going to be trying to share my screen, and I hope I'm sharing the right screen.
Yes, you are good.
And we're going to be talking about the change management, the human angle. And usually, obviously, a change management, it is about humans, it's not about processes, it's not about technology. The technology does what it says, not that much. I know we have a lot of tech people here, so the technology not always does what we want to do, but the most important portion of a change that involves usually technology, processes, people, is actually the people. So I would like to tackle this change attitude and change methodology from both perspective, work perspective, meaning us at work, or us in the private life, in the personal life. So I would start with a question and or a challenge. And probably we've seen this meme. It's all over the internet. It's all over. It's a funny way to introduce it, but it's very related to what we try to do in terms of job at work, and obviously even at home or with friends or anything else. There is something that we think that is not something that we should be doing because it's not my job. It's not in my job description. It's not in my set of tasks that I should be doing. Someone else should be doing that. And that is really something that, let me to find a very interesting poem that I'm going to be reading very quickly here. The poem related to It's Not My Job. If I can move to the next one, that would be awesome. No, not this one. This one. This is a story about 4 people named Everybody, Somebody, Anybody, and Nobody. And there was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have. I know there's a lot of words, but I'm pretty sure this is a situation that everyone felt or was into. And this takes me to change and how this one connects with change. Well, it connects with change, but because no change happens without responsibility, without taking responsibility, without being involved, without being engaged. And this is one of the two pillars of what I want to convey in the next slides, in the next couple of minutes more. How do we make sure that wherever we are in our personal life, at work, with friends, we are engaged and we make deliberate choices and we take deliberate actions as opposed to being done by us. So the change that we want to instill rather the change that falls upon us. Obviously, if there is something like a storm or anything that falls upon us, so we have to react to that. But in many cases, we can influence change and we can do something about it. So this is where the take responsibility, engagement, collaboration leads to efficiency and also to effectiveness. Now, a very important element of driving change, influencing change, and not be the victim of it, but the driver of it, it's very important. And the opposite example of this is something that I came across kind of recently. I haven't been raised here, so a lot of US history, obviously, for me, it was learned as an adult. But Bessie Coleman was someone who didn't stop at the first difficulty, at the first obstacle. And she did it really until she achieved it. And she has many citation, many very wise words, but I think this one allows me to convey what I wanted to say about take advantage of every opportunity. And again, connected to the take responsibility. Where there is none, make it for yourself. So she was born in 1892 in Texas, and she went to school. At a certain point, the father left, so the mother was alone with the 9 kids. And she went through school. She even had some savings, and the savings were enough for her to go to college for a year. Then she finished the money, so she had to stop and go back to work. But she always had an idea of flying. And obviously we're like decades away from commercial flying. There were just 1906, 1904, the first flights taking place. And definitely for a person of color and Native American was not something that, and a woman was not something that was immediately coming to mind. So, but she wanted so much, she worked a couple, 2 or 3 jobs in order to make enough money, learn some French, go in France, take a license, the first African American and Native American who had an international license to pilot in 1920, if I'm not mistaken, come back to the US and trying to be hired as a pilot. They were not hiring her despite having the license. She went back to Europe for another year in order to get more advanced skills. And then she came back and she started working as a stunt pilot. And she had a beautiful career. She's done exactly what she wanted. And she advocated, obviously, for everyone in her position to be able to do that. So again, take responsibility and use every opportunity. Now I can do it now. And this is how she affected not only change in her own life, personal life, but then obviously she served also as a model for many others to follow. She unfortunately died in an accident in one of her exhibitions. So she didn't have time to set up that school for pilots that she wanted to set up, but her enthusiasm and her example really opened the way for many other African Americans, women, to actually go into piloting. So this was just to frame a little bit the conversation. So we're just going to work a little bit through who I am. I'm going to introduce myself. We're going to work a little bit through the facets of change at work, the facets of change in a personal life. What are the 2 pillars of what are the 2 most effective weapons in affecting change, persuasion and persistence, and then we're gonna take questions. But again, the questions can come also through the presentation at any time. So I come from Romania. I started working actually in a non-profit, and in addition to fixing computers and setting up computer networks for a health clinic, I started also running projects in education, and then later on, when a war started in a nearby country, I ran refugee camps. So that first dips in project management really gave me a taste for what it is that a project can deliver, meaning the value they deliver through a project. You can understand it when you run a project in a corporation and say you have this business case, you have you know, effort, money, investment, and then you obtain that. So you see the profit, and those are the benefits. When I worked as a project manager to organize the whole logistics of you know, delivering food and whatever was needed to refugees across the whole town where I was, it was different. I mean, the value that I was getting was really making it sink in. What is the value of projects now? So when later I moved to for-profit and I started working on projects at the beginning in IT and then more operations and business projects, the first idea, the fact that the value is something that changes someone's life, remained in my memory and remained in my brain as a measure for how do I have to structure, deliver, and actually produce value at the end of project. When I started working on projects, actually, I had only my electrical engineer degree that I had from Romania, but I wanted to do a little bit more, and I was busy. I was already having a child. I didn't have time to leave my job. So obviously, for me, WGU was really the only opportunity for me to advance in my career. So I took advantage. When was it? In 2010, I graduated from WG with an MBA that helped me with all this preparation to take also a PMP, a Project Management Professional Certification, because I was all prepared to study. So after 2 years of MBA, I was able to run another year and half a year to study for PMP. And this is how currently I lead strategic initiatives within Marsh McLennan, which is a risk advisor and insurance broker, a global company. Any question that came, or we can continue? So
no questions
one of the... Say again?
No questions as of yet.
Okay. So obviously we're professionals, and I've seen you guys. I think you're coming from the business school. There's some healthcare, education, and definitely there's something that changes all the time. So changes that happens at work, in a corporate world, or in a hospital setting, or in a educational sector, could be related to technology disruption. And going back in history, obviously, electricity. Now I was reading about the Nikola Tesla and Thomas Edison current wars, the wars of current, and how that disrupted a lot of things in the industry, just with the use of electricity. But then more recently, the whole AI, Gen AI, and everything related to technology produces and generates change, whether it's imposed upon us as corporation, imposed upon the companies, or generated by the companies. Other changes, business process disruption. So when Airbnb and Uber appear, obviously the usual business model where you were owning a park of vehicles and you were operating a taxi company, or you were having hotels and other accommodations and you were running it. And with this Airbnb and Uber, the product to platform model changed everything, and obviously everyone, the incumbents, had to adjust. Downsizing, divestiture, in saturated markets like the US or others, there's very little growth, if not through acquisitions. But obviously, from the company perspective, the moment that you either acquire or you are acquired, there's a lot of change that impacts everyone. So you might be impacted by having to lead a change, so to implement that change, that acquisition, or you might be the subject of that change. So certain departments will have to merge, certain departments will have to disappear. So knowing how to both lead and be subject to change, it's very important. And I was putting on the left examples of change, on the right of the slide, what are the tools to implement change. And maybe the most important ones are related to communications, and the communication, whether it's awareness or training, in addition to business enablement, meaning taking the people that go from state A to state B through a journey in such a way that the people accept. Otherwise, we can drop certain things. I remember implementation of new platforms, like document management or a new CRM or anything else. We thought of the platform as something that it's very useful, that will bring a lot of benefits to the company and to the people, the colleagues, because they were losing less time using paper. But at the end, because we didn't think of how other things will impact the people, certain platforms were not well received. So importance not only of implementing the correct and right and without bugs products, but also taking the people in that journey. So this is where the training, communication, the enablement of people to run those changes is very important. I ran into a podcast a few months ago about the change, about the constant change. This is what it's called, the podcast. And the person that was interviewed during the podcast was talking about something that is very simple. 2 questions that you have to ask in order to identify the type of people that the stakeholders involved in this change. So he was asking the people, does the change impact me? So it's something that will be impacting me personally, because everything has a personal connotation and a personal view. There's no such a thing as the collective impact. It's me personally, I'm going to be impacted by the change or not. And then the second question, do I have an ability to influence? And obviously, in any change activity, in any change initiatives, usually you want to know the audience. Now you want to know how they think, who they are, what they object to, in order to put together elements or put together strategies in order to respond to their objections, or to calm down their enthusiasm, to curb their enthusiasm. But what I found very interesting in this example of crucial questions is that based on the impact and influence, obviously you have the typical champion, the one that is super enthusiastic, that person feels like can effectuate change, so their voices are heard, so they are the champions. Then you have the soldiers. You have the soldiers that, they see the impact positively because they feel like it's something good, but they don't think they have a voice in it. But it's okay. They just march, so they go ahead. And then you have the rebels, which see the impact as negative in themselves, but at the same time, they feel like they have a voice. This is why they're rebels, and they voice their concern. And because they voice their concern, we're able as an organization or a change agent to respond to their questions and objections and either train them or communicate better or adjust even the change itself. The only problem that we have is with the saboteur, because the saboteur, you don't know, they're hidden. They don't voice because they feel like the impact is negative, and they don't have any voice, meaning who will listen to me? No one will listen to me. So those are the most difficult set of stakeholders that can impact negatively the implementation of a change. So what was interesting by Dr. Polydevkis, who actually wrote a whole PhD thesis about this, although he's a business owner, he's a business person, he's not necessarily a university scholar, but he was so taken by this discovery that he wrote a whole PhD on it. He was saying the saboteur can be moved into one of the other quadrants by simply enabling communication. So even if you don't know who they are because they hide, they don't want to be seen as saboteur, they are hidden. By enabling communication, you reduce or you mitigate, make disappear their influence, meaning their voice heard. The moment that you enable channels for the saboteur to talk, they could become either rebels, or because they start talking, they could even become champions. But even if they become only rebels, would be much better, because then we know at least what we deal with and what are the objections and how can we deal with it. So that was really a very interesting take on how to effectuate change without knowing necessarily who are the saboteur, no, but how to move them from that saboteur diagram place into one or the other. Obviously, change doesn't happen only in work. It impacts also our personal life, and everyone goes through a lot of changes. Examples, New Year resolutions. How many times? We're still in January, so we're fresh about that. How do we implement those changes? It's something that has to be implemented. A job search. How long does it take for me to find a job? How many times? How many rejections do I have to go? How many interviews or a job loss with associated work ahead to find another job, or to initiate, or even to grow a family? They're all transformational changes that occur in our life, and we can almost apply the same set of change principles that we use at work, or vice versa. The change principles that we use in personal life, we can use also at work, in which negotiation and deep understanding of the other, it's crucial, because then you can tailor the communication based on understanding what the other person's needs and or objections and or pain is. Be able to run to offer trade-offs. No, we're not going to go necessarily 100% of how I want. You might not get 100%. A trade-off forces you to prioritize and trade off something that is of a lesser value for something that is a bigger value for you. That's the compromises. And sometimes look also for those win-wins, now, in which you don't have to necessarily lose something to find areas in which both parties, the parties in discussion, can win. Use diplomacy and flexibility. Now, you make a plan to implement your health and fitness program at the beginning of the year, and then something changes. You got a job, or the return to office is 5 days now, it's no longer 2 or 3 days a week, so your morning routine changes, so then you have to adapt. You make a plan only to scratch it and do a better one. Don't be shy to ask for help. Same thing can happen both in both in a personal setup and at work. Create routines. Again, those routines that you created for the morning, now you have to change it. But once it changes and you implement a different schedule, you can help yourself, because motivation doesn't come always every second. Sometimes I lose motivation, but if I have a system that every time at 7 o'clock I'm going to do yoga, or at 6 o'clock I'm going to be taking that brisk walk, then that will help me, because it's a thing that I do every day. So obviously you can see change from many perspectives, from many angles. You can see a lot of tools that are using. There are even certifications in change management. There are professionals, highly qualified professionals that are certified and are hired as change management professionals. But for the purpose of our conversation, I think two things we can take: persuasion and persistence. And we've seen with Bessie Coleman at the beginning, the persistence and the importance of persistence to achieve your goals, whether are personal or for the company or for an organization. Now, never give up intelligently, meaning if something doesn't work, try something else. Don't try over and over the same thing and expect different results. And then from the other standpoint, the persuasion, obviously, it's another very important tool that we can use in every situation, personal, at work. And I'm taking a page from Aristotle's rhetoric framework, in which logos, pathos, and ethos are used usually interchangeably, and not interchangeably, but collaboratively, in order to convince the other party of a better outcome. So obviously the logic consists in logic, consistency, and data. Build the business case. Now 1 + 1 is 2. It's logical, and this is why we need to do this project, or this is why we have to choose this restaurant when we go out with the friends, because of this, and that. So that's the logic. The caveat with those: don't exaggerate. Don't overwhelm with evidence. I think Coco Chanel had an advice: when you go up and dress up to go out for a nice event, before going out, take a look at you in a mirror and take off one thing. Usually we're over engineering, usually we're over loading. So take up one of the arguments, take up one of the evidence that you put in your business case, and go out, because usually we exaggerate. We have pathos, which is very important, the emotions, the pictures. And I know we have some healthcare professionals here. I think I remember an example of a hospital that was trying to convince the health professionals to wash their hands more often. And what they did, they take cultures from their hands, and they analyze it, and they put all the results on the computer screens that everyone is supposed to log in to do their work when they have to register or add their results and everything else. And they were showing the cultures and the bacteria and everything else that it had, in order to emotionally show the reason as to why to wash your hands more often. And then ethos, the trust and credibility and the credentials, the character, the competence, that has to be added. So with all these three facets of the persuasion, it's how we build our business case. Now, in many cases, pathos is what comes first in mind. Well, if it's really good business case, why don't they approve it? Because you need a little bit of emotion, and because you need a little bit more credibility. If you come from a place of credibility, then you are more likely to be approved. If you instill some emotion, it's more likely to move the people. And obviously the logic and consistency, it has its place. This was a very quick and just one-sided, or at least not too many sides of change as we encounter it at work and in personal life. If there are any questions, I would be more than happy to respond if I know. If I don't, I would say I don't know.
We did have a question come in through the chat. So who is responsible for enabling the communication? And if there is poor communication in the workplace, how can you create change when higher management is resistant?
It's a very good question, and it's very often that happens. And sometimes it's by design, and sometimes it happens. And unfortunately, we're not always in a position to dictate that, to dictate a change in communication or a change in the framework. What we can do, we can be leaders without being managers, meaning we can lead a drive for enhanced transparency where we are. Obviously, we operate in a specific department. We operate in a specific team. We might not be in the team that is specifically dedicated to the communication for a specific transformation. But if we start the communication and we have a good communication as a business as usual in our team, we can take this one as a model and export it, because the power of example is very powerful. It's very strong. In the moment that a team works well with a high transparency, has the opportunity, it's not a given that will work, has the opportunity to influence the others and instill and inspire more communication.
And feel free, if you want to post questions into the chat, or if you wanted to raise your hand, you should be able to take yourself off mute and ask any questions that you might have. So if I'll give people a minute or two to post questions into the chat, or like I said, if you wanted to raise your hand, you certainly could do that and ask any questions that you might have. One question I had, as people are thinking, as far as change management, any recommendations as far as getting into that field? I don't know if it's necessarily something that, somebody enters into school and they're like, hey, that's certainly something that I want to do moving forward. So I guess like any advice that you might have as far as those that might be seeking those types of opportunities and getting their foot in the door.
Sure. In my case, my involvement in change management comes from my involvement in project management. So I'm a project manager, program manager, and my belief is that change management is part of the project management, meaning when you deliver a project, whether it's a big transformation or a small platform delivery or I don't know, implementation of some regulatory project, change management has to be a mindset. And in fact, when I talk to companies, I suggest that change management be implemented as a capability, not necessarily as a function. Although I've seen many companies having also the change management function, which basically is a group of professionals that know how to implement change. And I mentioned earlier, there is a PROSCI, P-R-O-S-C-I. It's a certification like the PMP, the project management professional from PMI. There's the PROSCI, which is a certification that allows you to be recognized as a professional that delivers change. But change management is something that everyone should know. I mean, again, whether you're a teacher, you're a doctor or a nurse or a project manager or an accountant, knowing how to convince the others, knowing how to implement a change is paramount. But aside from that, there is a change management that can come either through project management. So you are a junior project manager, then you're a project manager program, and then from there you specialize more on the change management. Or you come from communication. Communication, it's another path that you come into change management, because part of the change management is communication, training, and business enablement. Or you can be simply a business leader, I mean, a business analyst that becomes a leader that is tasked with implementing one change. So the more prepared you are, obviously, is not necessarily your title change manager, but you are basically tasked with implementing a change. But for beginning of a career, definitely project management, marketing, communications, internal communication and external ones are also viable paths to become a change manager.
Any questions anybody might have? And feel free, if you want to raise your hand and come off mute, let us know, or post those into the chat.
Thank you, Jason.
We did have a question come in. How can you implement change management techniques at an organization that doesn't have these practices?
It's not easy. In many cases, change management occurs top down, meaning decision to implement a change, like for example, transform your sales business now, or transform your operations, or implement a new CRM platform. This is a decision at the top. Now we decided that we have to do that, or we have to acquire this other company. Oh, this is not a voting of the employees. Is the higher management decides to do that, and then you suffer the consequence, if you want, of that change. Now, if there is no formal change management, or even awareness and appreciation for the change management, this usually comes in, the result of it comes in failure of those transformation, failures of implementation. So whether it's small projects or large implementation, large transformations, if consistently under-deliver or fail to properly be implemented, usually this is a call for action for the management to understand what's missing. Usually this is the lessons learned at the end, or towards the end, or in the middle of a failing initiative. And what you could do in your role that might not be the senior leadership is to promote the values that come from change management, which is what I showed in the previous slides, related to the analysis of the stakeholders. So for example, all this quadrant of stakeholders analyzing who's the champion, the soldiers, and the stuff. That way you can help who's delivering that change to execute proper communications to, for example, diminish the percentage of the saboteur, respond to the rebels, keep moving the soldiers ahead, and obviously feeding the champions, because they're the ones that drive everything. So what you could do is to influence by launching your own mini awareness campaign of the value of structured communication and structured training and structured business enablement now. And this type of communication and transparency usually is one of the most important aspects of delivering something successfully. No, and if there is communication, then transparency leads also to corrective action. No, because you don't just leave it free everyone to speak and then no action is taken. Usually, if there is goodwill, transparency brings also ideas. Yes, and then it's anybody know what is somebody? It's taking responsibility with your ability to influence. Again, leadership is not about the line management, how high on the ladder of of the leadership. You are on the management. You are the leader, leads through actions and through inspiration.
And Gene had a question. What's the biggest misconception people have about driving change?
That it's easy. That if you have the good product, it's going to go. If you have the right technology, it's obvious that people will accept it. And the biggest misconception is that people are easy to convince. And they have everything open. So they're maybe not biggest. I put a few of the biggest. Yeah, probably the wrong assumptions, to summarize what I said earlier, the wrong assumptions is the biggest misconception. When you have assumptions, you always have to validate them. And once you validate, you can adjust and you can change the change path. If you have misconception, have assumptions that you don't validate, that will bring to failure.
The next comment was Diane. I appreciate the transparency and communication emphasis. Managers who are afraid of change may paint someone who is attempting change as a sabotager. But if you are transparent and communicate email trails, that would be harder to do.
Sure, and again, communication doesn't mean to be naive. No, I mean, just because a manager acts one way or another, that doesn't mean that necessarily acts for the good of the organization. Many people, and I mean everyone, acts also in self-interest. No, I mean, I'm not going to do something that I'm going to harm myself, corporate world or at work, I'm saying, just because I want to harm myself. So in many cases, there are you don't know why that manager acts that way. Maybe to protect her own position, maybe to maybe themselves are saboteur, although they act in a way as in supporting an initiative, but they are deep down saboteur themselves. And we don't have to be naive and openly and transparently, assuming everyone's good intention, say everything. Obviously, we have to run our influence intelligently. Now, intelligently, I mean find a network of allies, and use the network of allies to advance change and advance transparency without necessarily putting yourself in a hot spot. Thank you.
Any other questions? And I'll give people a minute to post those. Just a reminder, the session is being recorded and that will be sent out. So if you want to go back and review anything that was covered, you certainly can do so. No other questions.
I can also share the PDF if you want of this. I mean, it's just a couple of slides, but
that would be fantastic. And Rebecca did have a question. If I want to make a change and I want to be wise in planning, what are her first steps?
Well, it's always planning. It's obviously the first step. And I see the change as in planning, activating, and executing. In many cases, we're good at planning, and we might be good at executing, but we're not activating, which is exactly the people component, the people dimension of the change, in which we make sure that the people are accounted for and in the loop, or according to their role. Not everyone has to be in the loop for everything. So when I say transparency, it doesn't mean blurting everything out to everyone, because that's cacophony. That's going to be a broadcast that you will lose audience. No, it's targeted communication. So If you want to make a change, obviously you find yourself sponsors. Now, if it's a change that it's at work, you find a sponsor that could advocate for you, whether it's a leader, whether it's a manager, or even again other people, other peers that can rally the troops and rally the interest to put together. And then obviously you make a business case. Now, why you're doing it? What are the pros? What are the cons? What are the benefits to obtain? It's like any project. Now you put together a business case, rally the troops, gather resources and approval, and then run with it to obtain those benefits.
Maggie, absolutely can come off mute and ask your question.
So, my question was, how do you advocate change? Like as a new person, I know, obviously you don't want to come in changing everything, but let's say like HR, like that's my degree
Mhm.
in, and like that's kind of like my background. But let's say my boss doesn't have a degree in HR, and I follow the SHRM guidelines, which is the Society of Human Resource Management, and I know what certain laws are. So I'm more, well versed in the HR laws than she is. How would I encourage that change in the, I guess, team? Even though I'm a new person, like I guess how would you communicate that
Mhm.
without sounding like, hey, I know more than you, or you
Yeah,
know what I
which
mean? Like,
probably would close all the doors from the get-go.
right, right.
Definitely. Personally, what I would do in a new situation like that, let's say I changed jobs, I got into a new place. My first reaction is to learn what is going on there, to understand the environment, and by understanding the environment, understanding also the pain points. Now, whether it's going well or not going well, maybe it's going well, and they make do with what they have. You might know a better way to do it, but for now, that works. But before going and proposing something that is unasked for, you have to understand the environment, you have to understand the pain points and the people involved in that. And then once you understand that, you have to look for the what's in it for me. Again, we're individuals. Now we live in a community, but we are individuals. So for everything, there is a what's in it for me. And this is a very, very basic principle of the change management. Also, you have to find what is that triggers, what is that makes that person tick, and find something that would support that. So find some change that would support something that it's a pain point or that makes that person happy or her or his work easier. No? So start from small. I always use the analogy of the lowest hanging fruit. Start from that perspective, something that it's in it for that person, and then that one with a successful implementation of that small small hanging fruit, then go to the next one and on and so on. Yes, adopt and then adapt. Yes. Which adapt, first you adapt and then you push for change, which means moving the waters, Rebecca. Yes.
Awesome. I don't see any other questions as of now. So I do want to say, Cyprian, thank you so much for coming and presenting. We certainly appreciate it. It's something that I know that we have a lot of value having, our alumni coming back and connecting with current students, with their fellow alumni in these types of sessions. So we certainly appreciate your expertise and you shedding some light on change management. Certainly is huge for us. So thank you for jumping in and presenting. And then just a reminder to everybody, this session was recorded, so certainly go back and rewatch the recording. But I'll give you the floor if you had any closing remarks that you wanted to share. Any insight would be fantastic. But thank you again for jumping in this evening and chatting with us a little bit.
Sure. No, RJ, thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm always open. This is why I put also my contact information. Happy to connect with anyone. I'm happy to help any WGU. I always like to score LinkedIn, and when I see a WGU, I smile because I don't know what they're doing. But when I see someone who graduated from WGU, I like it. I don't know that person, but I like it because I really enjoy my time in WGU, and I don't feel like it's ended. It's still on. I'm still in WGU, so definitely. Connect with me, or if you have any questions or anything, it's I'm here to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for jumping in this evening, and hopefully you took a ton of information away. We certainly appreciate you participating in Career Quest, and what we'll do is we'll end it from here. Thank you again, and everybody have a great rest of your evening. Take care.
Thank you.